So this is our virtual community with the focus on staying focused in a remote work world. So last week we had a lean coffee session where we explored some of the topics and challenges that the participants were having with this new work from home, work entirely remote situation that we find ourselves in. And this is the first session kind of focused in on one of those topics. So we'll introduce you to our facilitators. So I'm Dan Newman over on the far right, although I have decided to get whiskery here in the winter months in Indiana. It's great for snowboarding. And then Andrea Floyd is a transformation consultant, one of my colleagues, and Quincy Jordan, a principal transformation consultant, who will be hosting the content session in a few slides.
I feel like I'm on one of those game shows where like they call the person and then they wave.
Yeah. Yes, feel free to wave. That's totally acceptable. So a little bit about AgileThought. We are a very distributed company. We're in 6 countries, 20 years old at this point, and have 3,000 consultants, both in the US, Mexico, and scattered throughout South America. So being distributed is something we're used to. Being this distributed with all the work from home is definitely something that is also introducing some new challenges. We have practices that are both on the Agile transformation side. Myself, Andrea, Quincy, and a number of my colleagues are in the transform practice. The big chunk of our work is on the build, so doing a lot of custom app development, again with nearshore, US based as well. There's a lot of distribution, and then the ability to help organizations run their operations, whether it's something that's been built or not on ours. So we do find ourselves with a lot of different facets to the business and a lot of distribution as well. If you can go on to the next one. So the setup that we've envisioned is having a forum talk, so kind of focused in on a topic and then some practice talks that follow on. And so a practice talk is additional practice and building experience with a particular topic. So we're going to be talking about the challenges of multitasking today and of context switching. And then next week, we're going to be talking about forming working agreements to help with this challenge. And then we'll have another practice talk the week after that. So this is one of a series, and we'll invite you to join us for those upcoming ones, and we'll share the information on how to connect with that towards the end of this session. So staying focused in a remote work world, the way we're going to flow through this is we'll take some of the challenges that were introduced in the lean coffee, and we have some of those challenges as well as then some tips related to how to address that. And then we're also going to look for you to share some of your experience, things that are working for you or not working for you in this world as you try to stay focused, deliver work, meet family obligations, be responsive to your coworkers, all those different challenges. And as I mentioned before, just in case some folks have come in the last 2-3 minutes, we are recording it and do want to share because there are others who are facing similar needs, similar challenges, and we just want to make sure that we're able to help out as best we can there as well. So a little bit of a working agreement. If we were doing a session with a bigger time box, we would probably invite contributions to this. To the degree you're able and comfortable, we'll invite you to have cameras on. You know, one scenario, somebody had a child, they don't want to broadcast their child, totally understand. There may be other reasons why you would not be comfortable with your camera on, and that's okay, but we'll invite you to have those on. It can be easy in a distributed world to say something that comes off insensitive, and so we'll ask you to be additionally aware of being respectful in tone and words, and giving others a place to speak up, and we'll be sure to invite you to contribute as well, both through the chat and verbally. Sometimes bandwidth issues, dogs bark. They were testing the emergency sirens here, the tornado sirens a little while ago. So if that had been going on, we would have had a pretty noisy background. So please do use good mute practices as you're able. And then we'll share and learn together. Andrea is going to be watching the chat in Zoom. There's a feature called Hands Up, and she'll show you that and some other Zoom features. Oh yes, and Lori has 2 dogs in Jacksonville, so totally understand, although I would love to see them on the camera.
Great. So just for those of you, I'm sure many of us are very accustomed to Zoom these days, but just in case you're not, if you were to look at your bottom display, you should see a bar that looks something like what's depicted here. If you don't see it, just hover around the bottom of your screen, it will come up. So as mentioned by Dan, please be aware of your mute button. We are going to ask for some conversation to happen through the presentation. So we'll give you signals if you're on mute and you don't realize it. Also, just to reiterate, love to see you on video, but understand that there's some constraints sometimes with bandwidths around that. So as you can, join us that way. And then we're going to be actively using that chat window to respond to some of the questions throughout this presentation. So I'll be moderating it and looking for some great ideas to flow as we go, and then we'll have conversations based on what we see. Going on to the next. So if you're going to use chat, and I hope that you do, if you're not familiar, once you click on that icon, you'll be presented with a toolbox, and you can either speak to everyone, and that's probably the best format you'll be using. But if you needed to speak to somebody privately, when myself or the other facilitators, just select our names and we'll respond as we can. And then finally, last is there's a feature down around the participants to raise your hand. If you do that, my job today is to watch the chat window actively, look for that signal. Feel free to interject as we go along. This is a collaborative session, but if you aren't able to get yourself heard, please raise your hand and I'll make sure we notice you. That's it. Thanks.
Right. So we are ready to jump in to today's dialogue. Staying focused in a remote world and context switching. All right, so just by a literal physical raise of hands, how many people are familiar with what context switching is? Just trying to get an idea. All right. All right. All right, so yeah, so good. So quite a few folks are familiar with context switching. And in its essence, it's really trying to do more than one task at a time. I like to kind of think of it as really just trying to do too many things at one time. And sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we have to context switch. Sometimes we don't have a choice. But there is an impact to context switching. And in this new all remote world that we have all been thrusted in over the past few weeks, couple of weeks or so, we are experiencing context switching like never before. And when I say never before, it's one thing for many of us to work from home while everyone else may be away, in particular kids or other guests maybe. But when everyone is in the home and everyone has to be there, then it brings about some new challenges. So there's some additional information out there on context switching experiment that was done in 2001 by Joshua Rubinstein and Jeffrey F. Evans and David Meyer. So feel free to Google that stuff and take a look at it. We won't go into deep detail around that, but just know context switching has a lot of impact. So we're going to go through some different slides. Each slide will have a picture. That picture will kind of encapsulate what we're trying to say about that particular topic. So the first one is switching between work and family. So we'll also give you some tips, but we also want to hear from you as well. So when we're looking at switching between work and family, so one of the things that we suggest that we think is very helpful is to set a time box to focus on work and let your family know when that time box actually takes place. That way, everyone is on the same page. People know what to expect. And you may run into things that you don't necessarily anticipate. So at AgileThought, we're often very transparent with our experiences, and I'll do the same with that today. So I am actually in my kitchen. I'm in my kitchen because I was having Wi-Fi problems, and our modem is in the kitchen. So I'm hardwired into the modem, and I had to come into the kitchen. So in order to do that, I had to let everyone else in the house know between this time and that time, I'll really need everyone to stay off of this floor. Is that okay with everyone? And fortunately, everyone said okay, eventually. So we were able to get there. And then also create time for your family that works with your new norm. So even though we're working and we're all home, make the most of it. Take some time out. If you take a 5-minute break to go outside and walk or something like that, maybe you can go out and do that as a family. This is really a rare opportunity that we all have as well. So what are 2 ideas that have worked for you over this time, or maybe just even over the past? And so you can put these ideas in the chat, and Andrea will moderate the chat. So 2 ideas that have worked for you when it comes to switching between work and family while working from home.
So there's agreement that the 2 that you mentioned are correct. Let's see, there are some ideas about office space. So they have a door and they close that as an indicator. Others have a clear time frame for their kids when they can come out and play or be available. And then other individuals are using similar techniques about time boxing and making sure they're communicating those times that they need to focus or when they can be available. There's other visual cues that people are using, like lowering their laptop or keeping their headphones on and saying, listen, I'm in the midst of working. When you see those indicators, there you go. And then other people are looking for times throughout the day to get out and about and take a breather. So they either do it during their day or maybe at the end of their day so that people know they'll get connections then. Let's see. So a lot of great ideas in here, but it just seems like there's a variety of ways, but communication is definitely a key, and coming up with some way of making people visibly aware when they need to be mindful.
So there's one in particular that, there's one in particular that really stands out to me that I would like to hear more about, which is what George Garcia has put in. All family members have assigned areas inside the house where they can work, and we know if they are there, we need to be quiet around them. So I'm a little interested to understand or just kind of hear, how did that conversation go and take place? And there's a lot that I actually see that could be unpacked in that.
Sure, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, my wife and I have 2 boys, and so my wife is a school teacher, and my 2 boys, they're all in the same district, and so beginning today, actually, they began online learning. So my wife is sequestered the basement and has set up kind of a mock classroom because she's got to do some recording and things like that, with, through things like Zoom. And then my one son has kind of built a fort in the living room. We've got one of those 10 by 10 tents. Anyway, as everybody knows, you're just trying to make things interesting and unique and different for each of them as we're kind of sequestered here. So he goes in the fort and has started his iPad learning and all that stuff. And then my other son is in the kitchen. And so the understanding is that, I'm fortunate enough that I work from home, so I have an office with a door closed and all that good stuff. So I haven't been as impacted as much. But for those, for the new ways, it's, we've just got to be really conscientious of one another. And when the headphones are on or they, raise a finger in the air, that they're on a call and can't be disturbed. So we're kind of, today was the first day in real practice.
Nice. And there's one other that I would like to hear as well, if you wouldn't mind, Elizabeth. Breaking up work hours, so I have family time while kids awake, and then work time later in the evening.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have a very young child, so she goes to bed pretty early. So it seems silly to me to be kind of in an office until 5 o'clock and then come out, do dinner, and she'll go to bed pretty soon after. So I've been cutting my work day a little bit shorter so I have more time with her while she's awake, and then I'll log back on for an hour or so after she goes to bed to catch up on whatever I would have done towards the end of the day. So just trying to take the opportunity to make my schedule a little bit more flexible so that I can not feel like I'm missing out on the time with her when she's in the other room.
Nice. Nice. All right. Appreciate that input from both George and Elizabeth. So we will move on to the next slide, but this will be the format that we'll use for each one of these slides. So we'll use the chat. We'll give the tips and techniques, and we'll talk through them a little bit and hear from everyone. All right, so constant notifications and alerts. Like, no one experiences this, right? This doesn't happen. All right, so find something others can agree to. So expectations about what requires an urgent response. Put tools and devices on Do Not Disturb for a while. So these are some of the things I know I have experienced where, you know, I've been heads down trying to get something done, and, you know, then I see a chat, you know, and something coming across in MS Teams, and sometimes I debate, okay, should I respond to it? Should I keep doing what I'm doing? Just that little bit of time is a context switch in and of itself that I'm even thinking about it. But, you know, those things happen. So have you experienced this? Do you have notifications and alerts that have caused you to context switch, maybe at times that were maybe not the most opportune times, or have you had good experiences with that in this remote working? So what are two ideas that you have that have worked for you? And if you could put those in the chat.
I'm curious if this is a bigger challenge. I don't see the ideas flooding in like we did on the first one.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry I lost video for a minute. So
No, that's all right.
That's all right.
Oh, put the phone in another room.
yeah, and did you guys were talking about the signal cards? I know that was mentioned for the prior topic, but seem relevant here.
Oh,
No,
we
we
not.
didn't.
Go ahead.
But it
Yeah,
did
go
seem,
ahead,
yeah, it did seem to be pretty hot in the chat, though.
Yeah. Okay, so a handful of ideas there. Anything call out to you that you want to go in a little deeper on, Quincy?
I'm looking through now.
Well, one of them that jumps out to me, Quincy, is the actual leaving the phone in another room.
Yeah.
Which even on Do Not Disturb, I know I will distract myself by, you know, occasionally picking up this silly little device and fiddling with it. So that's an interesting one to me.
I'm also guilty of squirrel when instant messages come up and people want to chat. If I see it, I'll switch context to respond, and then I have to go take a few minutes to restart what I was doing. So I know I could get better about putting Do Not Disturb on.
Yeah, so the leave the phone in another room, Jen, can you elaborate on that? Like how do you, when you do that, are you struggling to feel like you're missing something, or are you just completely fine with it? And, you know, just do other people know that you do that? How does that look for you?
So don't use the phone much for work. So I find we do a lot of IMing during the work hours. So if anybody really needs to get a hold of me, they'll do that through IM. What I was finding, and actually I just started kind of typing it, but is that if I have the phone next to me and I'm working on something difficult or unpleasant, I'm kind of looking for things to distract myself or do anything other than what I'm supposed to be doing. And if the phone's next to me, it's really easy to just pick it up. Oh, you know, what's the latest numbers on COVID? What's happening in Florida? Did they shut us down yet? And it's like, if it's not right next to me, then it's not as easily distracting me. So I'll go stick it on the charger. I'll put it in a drawer. I may hear the you know, whatever beeping or something that it's telling me, oh, my family text is going off or something. But if I have to actually get up, walk away, and go get it, I'm less apt to do that. So I'll recognize it and go, nope, you got to stay here, get this piece finished, and then use that as a reward. I can go look and see what those were.
Oh, interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, that's good. Set up your own reward system. That's a good motivator there.
Yep.
All right, and there was one other that I wanted to kind of come back to. So Lori Holloway. So you found that it helps to prioritize channels of communication: text, phone, calls, team chats, meetings, email, etc. So do others know about your prioritized product backlog of communication? Is that
Can you hear
something?
me okay? Quincy, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Actually, as I was typing it and sort of had the idea, I didn't even realize I was doing it intentionally. So some might know, like my team members that I regularly interact with, I say, if you need me right now, text me. It's the fastest response you'll get. Don't send me an email. It's the last thing it's the last thing I'm going to look at. And then maybe do the email sprinting later in the day, take a time that just says, let's look at email. But I think right now we're all just so focused on rapidly responding to any sort of change that we have, all the things you all just mentioned, that we're getting flooded with communication and information so much faster. It is hard to stay focused. So I'm finding that without intention, and now I probably will be more intentional about it, is to say, okay, what will I prioritize? Because even with Teams, our company has put forth all the different channels, and there's so many different ways people are communicating through that. So it is trying to identify what are the areas of focus there, and then work through them throughout the day. And of course, you know, looking at meetings and understanding what are the priority meetings that we need to be a part of, and what are we going to get the most value out of, including that into that. But until you asked the question, I started typing. I didn't realize I was even doing it from just a channel of prioritization. So I will be more intentional about that, actually, since we talked about it.
Nice. All right. Hey, thanks for sharing. All right. All right, so the next one is not enough me time. All right, so what do we mean by not enough me time? All right, so we're working, right? And we're working from home. We may have family at home or guests or whoever it is that we're co-isolated with these days. And it's important to actually take a moment for yourself, just for you, like not to focus on work, not to focus on your other family members, but really just for your own sanity, you know, to be perfectly honest. So some of the tips we have here is to take a moment to look or go outside. I find that to be very refreshing. It doesn't take long, you know, literally could be 2 to 4 minutes. And it brings a sense of focus, you know, back to me. And let your family know how to recognize you are taking a moment. So I liked the idea earlier too about the signal cards, because you could actually have a signal card that basically says, hey, I'm taking a moment, you know, this is what I'm doing. But it's important for people to know that, so that, for example, in my case, if I stand outside, that my family isn't looking at me strange, like, why are you standing out there staring at the sun with your eyes closed? Because it helps to refresh me. And they know that, so I kind of jest. But so what are 2 ideas that have worked for you in this current climate to make sure that you are getting a little bit of me time in there?
So seeing lots of great ideas, definitely focus around getting up and getting outside, taking breaks intermittently through the day. I love the motorcycle ride. And then, see, so it's just finding, I guess, those things that you feel rejuvenate you. I see exercising, breaking up the day. And then there was a comment about their days just stretch on anyways. So maybe they're open days in the morning. Yes.
Nice. Yeah, these are some good ideas. Yeah, and it is interesting that the majority, I think the majority of ideas involve some level of physical activity, whether it's getting outside or stretching inside. So that is an interesting observation, that physical activity seems to help many of us to regain focus. Or so Lori Heiselman, Farming, sorry. Many, yes. So yeah,
Heinz,
so
like ketchup.
Heinz, all right. So many people struggling with making the time, which I have started suggesting to my teams to block the time for themselves. So how did that conversation go?
Well, I actually just observed that my teams were working from 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. Some of them are online, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. And they feel compelled that they have to just keep working and working and working because they're at home. Especially, I'm finding it's people who are alone, people who are single, that don't have families. And so, we have conversations with each other, and that's what I said. I said, you need to make some time for yourself. It is very important that you don't just work. And I don't know if it was you, Quincy, but somebody had recommended the going outside, closing your eyes and looking up at the sun at the last lean coffee. And I recommended doing something like that, but also blocking the time on their calendar for lunch, because I found people weren't taking lunches. So I said, block that time, whether it's, if you can't do an hour, like 15 minutes, half an hour just for you, so that you step away and you do something for you. But it's actually a common topic. People are bringing it up in our stand-ups and just in our regular meetings, and just letting them know we all feel that pain of how do we make that time for ourselves. So that's kind of where it stemmed from.
Nice, and that's really good too for those of us that are in leadership to show that level of support, and advocate for people to do that. So that is really good. So there is one more that I cannot pass this one up. So Alana, so planning April Fool's Day surprise was a challenge, but it was totally worth it. All right, so your me time involved fooling others. So let's talk about that one.
Yeah, thank you. I guessed you would bite the bait there. So I've love to do April's Fool Day every year, and this year, well, obviously it was very challenging, and the only thing that saved me that I plan it usually in advance, and the first day I heard that we might go on lockdown and work from home, I ordered a surprise on Amazon, and we were watching all the James Bond movies recently with my husband. So I ordered the cutout of Sean Connery, James Bond, like full-size cutout. And I was just lucky enough to get the delivery and hid it under the couch in the living room while my husband was upstairs. And so on April 1st, after we were already working from home 2 weeks, and like we inseparable, right? Nobody lives on his own, and we're always together. He just walks downstairs for the breakfast and he sees Sean Connery full size, and he still creeps us out. Like we cannot get used to it anymore. So that was pretty fun.
Nice. Thanks for sharing, Alana. All right. So we will move on, and I will also, even though I'm actually contributing to context switching in this case, but we have a lot of good things in chat, and obviously we can't go through all of them, but there's some good things there to have a look at as we're going through if you get a chance. So are you having to multitask? I think the answer is yes, from what I'm hearing from most of us. but how does that make you feel? So what emotions has it stirred up, and what's been the impact of that? So we'll just kind of open this up to just, a couple of minutes of dialogue, and you don't necessarily have to put it in the chat if you don't want to, or you can. Either way, it's perfectly fine. So actually, yeah, let's do this. Let's put them in the chat. That may be a little easier for us to go through it. So what are those feelings and those emotions that it's giving you? And what is the impact of that?
So getting some comments around how it makes people feel exhausting, anxiety, stressed. I like the image of the hamster on a wheel. And I think another good image is being pulled in multiple directions that I'm seeing from some folks.
Mm-hmm.
Exhausting and draining seem to be a
common thread. Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a common thread around really, I think the one comment that says overwhelmed really sums up a lot of that, many of us are feeling overwhelmed. And which is also interesting because, for so long, people were like, oh, I want to work from home. I want to work from home. Well, you got it. And we're all going through it, right? So it's a little bit too much of a good thing in some ways.
Hey, Quincy, one that jumped out to me that's in here and resonated when I saw it was too much scratching the surface and not enough depth. And we'll talk about that. The depth of the work really affects the ability or the inability to multitask and still make progress. So listen to a podcast, stir a pot. Yeah, maybe I can do both of those things, but deep knowledge work, thrashing back and forth. So Mike, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Sure. It's there are so many things going on that I'm trying to do the incremental approach, but it's like just a little bit on this, move on to something else, a little bit on that, move to something else, a little bit on that, and for sure, if I had the opportunity to just concentrate on one, maybe two things in total, then it'd be a lot more productive to actually get things done faster.
Any suggestions from anyone that would maybe help bring solutions to that? Just curious to see what.
I do have one. It's okay. I've learned that no is a complete sentence.
Yes, it is. All right. Let's see. Are there any others that we want to delve into before we continue? Yeah, I thought this is interesting. So, Lori, normally work from home is not stressful, but at the current situation, on top, coupled with having nowhere to go and socialize, makes things a bit more difficult. Yeah, I definitely think that's true.
Well, and not only that, but having to look for a job in this environment is even more stressful.
Yeah.
So yeah. I wish I did have a work at home struggle, and I kind of do, in that I'm looking for a job. So that makes it a little more challenging as well.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you're doing some of the right things. You're joining, like this today, and those are the kinds of things that help to keep our skills sharp and help us to meet new people and have some level of connectedness in this new world. So those things are good.
Yes. Yeah, that's how I'm kind of combating some of that.
Yeah.
And doing volunteer work. So.
Nice.
That helps too.
Quincy, just to wrap that up, I was seeing some great comments just coming in towards the latter part around scratching the surface, just doing the, quick wins first, focusing on doing some training maybe around the first thing. And then Jen came out with a recommendation of a Kanban board. And so several came up sort of related on that.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. The Kanban board is definitely been good for me. I mean, well, I use it, anyway, but it's also been good, like for our son with his work. He's not as proficient with it as I would like for him to be, but it does make it a lot easier to say, no, that's not done. That is in the category of needs to be validated, and it's not done until mom or dad has signed off on it. Then it's done. So yes, Kanban boards are good, and they have helped.
And that's our April 16th practice talk as well. So we'll be sending out communication tomorrow on how to connect to that session. So for people interested in Kanban, deeper dive in a couple weeks.
Yeah. All right, so now we're gonna move on to the second part of the forum today, which is on connectedness. So we're still talking about staying focused, but we're also now talking about, well, the things that help us to stay focused sometimes is also staying connected to people that we need to stay connected to. And as we know, being in this new way of doing things, connectedness is a little bit more difficult, in some ways. And maybe I shouldn't say it's more difficult, it's different than what many of us have been accustomed to. So sometimes we miss the work conversations because we're not getting that. You're not necessarily bumping into people like you normally would, just walking into the building or walking around the office. So some of the things to help with missing those work conversations is to leverage video conferencing tools, such as like what we're doing, but specifically for work social time. So one of the things that we have started doing within our practice is we're actually having a social happy hour. So we meet like right shortly after hours, and it's, just like a regular happy hour, but everyone's virtual, and we're just kind of just kicking back and just kind of talking about stuff. So also chat about it with coworkers using collaboration tools like MS Teams. So in this particular instance, there was one of our colleagues that I don't remember if the person reached out to her or they reached out to the person, but it was a spontaneous video conference, just right at the moment, how's it going? And instead of making a phone call, it was just a video call. And so fortunately, I guess she was in position to take the call and took it. And, but it was, from what was expressed, it was pretty refreshing, to do it that way and fill the gap. So what are two ideas that have worked for you? And it looks like you all are on the ball already putting things in. Great.
Yeah, seeing whether it's happy hour or coffee chats is popular. Folks are talking about some collaboration tools, for example, Mural and others, in terms of using that for connection. So reaching out, and it sounds like a lot of them are understanding the importance of the video aspects.
Mm-hmm. Good ideas. So the water cooler break, can you tell me what that looks like?
Yeah, so I had a team that an executive actually approached me. Oh, sorry. We're both Lori H. I had a team that approached me on, she's an executive, she's really struggling with now that her teams are distributed, that they really wanted a way to connect and really just, they were connecting more one-on-one independently and not as a collective group. So I suggested that they just set time aside, put a virtual space out there. It's not a mandatory meeting. Just make it not about COVID, not about the challenges, just make a space that you would create that you would normally do at the water cooler or in the break area, where you could just decompress and collaborate together. And so she said it went really well and they're doing it on the regular. That's how we approached it.
Nice. All right. And I'll take one other, Carl. So you say you all are having 2 sessions a day, stand up and check in. So is that's different than when you all were in the office, or is that kind of bridging the gap from how things were already being done in the office?
Quincy, I see it's totally different than what we were doing in the office. We actually have our normal stand-ups usually at 9:30 in the morning, but now we actually have a follow-up session in the afternoon just to check in on everyone, see how things are going, what progress has been made. We've also gone to the fact of going to 1-week sprints instead of 2-week sprints so that we can start moving things a little bit faster.
Nice. Nice. Thanks for the input. All right, so we're going to continue to move ahead. So specifically, no water cooler talk in this case, and not feeling connected. So it's good, as I mentioned earlier, to have that spontaneous kind of video chat or something like that if you know the opportunity is there, and you know in particular you have that kind of relationship maybe with that person, and just reach out and just say what you doing and just see how things are going, you know. So also use the cameras so that you can get the nonverbal cues to know there's more to the conversation. That's really important as well. Most of us, you know, we have our cameras on, some of us don't, and that's okay. We know some of the reasons why, but just as a habit, it, you know, helps with the feeling of being connected. There's some psychology around what happens in our brains when we see those facial responses, and those things, you know, make a big difference for us. So what are 2 ideas that have worked for you in this case? I know we mentioned about the water cooler talk earlier. Is there anything else? Share TP memes. Can you tell me more about that, Alana?
And if I think that we have one good thing out of the situation, the internet is full of new memes, and we all have a story about toilet paper. So that's something that we just share the latest joke, or ask how your hunt for toilet paper is going.
Yes. All right. Toilet paper, the new currency. I hear you.
Exactly.
All right. So we won't take another one for this time, just considering the time. But I do like the ideas there about the chat jokes. And I've actually been found myself, I think, putting more stuff out on our team's channel, jokingly and so forth. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good thing to do. All right, so how can I not go stir crazy at home? All right, so we don't want to be this guy, right, who is having some issues there. So we talked about this earlier a little bit, or we talked about some of these tips earlier as far as stretching and doing breathing exercises. That was related to the me time, but the me time also helps you not to, you know, really lose your sanity, you know, being at home. And I say that jokingly, but it is also, you know, a pretty serious thing, you know, especially for some of the folks, like someone mentioned earlier, that live alone. And, you know, that can be a serious thing to really, you know, make sure that you're paying attention to. And so you want to make sure that you listen to your mind and your body. Like, that's really important. Your mind and your body will sometimes help you to just know, okay, you're doing a little bit too much, you need to pull back. Like someone just said, go outside, get some fresh air, get some sunlight. Like, those things are really good. Let's see if there's one or two that we want to jump in. Hot tub. All right, let's hear about that one, Darryl. jump into the hot tub and have a good time and relax.
Yeah, it's my wife. Just about every evening we'll go out and do that, and especially it's cool right now in Atlanta. But something she said interesting that really stuck with me the other day is the birds were. It was after a storm came through. The sky was super clear. Birds were chirping. We were out there in the evening, and she said, this is really a blessing. We've got a backyard we're hearing the birds chirp and we're just sitting here talking, and it's the simple things that we've taken for granted that I don't want to do that again, so, but that's kind of our time together, just to chat and relax.
Nice. Yeah, I can actually see, down the road in one of our community events, and we're probably talking about the new normal, how we don't want to go back to certain things, after a point.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really a rare, opportunity that we've had really in our lifetime. How many folks have been able to spend this amount of time together, and it's not, on vacation, like it's everyone's at home like that. That is a rare opportunity. So I think this may be one of the last couple of slides. Have I eaten today? And can I stop eating today? All right. So we have both extremes there. So some of the tips here are to maximize the opportunity with family to eat together. So this one actually really kind of hit home for me a few days ago. So my wife had said she had cooked some lunch. And so, I kind of did like my eagle approach and just kind of swooped in, grabbed everything, ate real quick, and then flew out. And then she came back later and she said, well, I thought we were going to eat together. And so my immediate knee-jerk reaction was like, well, I have all this stuff to do. I have these things I'm working on. I didn't think we were going to do that. And then our son, he has his classes, and then you have your work. And then later that night, I was thinking, I was like, there really isn't a reason that we couldn't have lunch together. And what opportunities would we have to have lunch together like that? So I made it a point, after that to say, okay, you know what? Yes, let's have lunch together as a family. Like we would almost never be able to have lunch together as a family, not during the week, in most cases. So and going on to the next one, as far as if you feel like, hey, I can't stop eating, I'll just keep snacking all the time on things, then you can put things out of sight so it's out of mind. If it's not in front of you, sometimes you won't partake in it. And you know your habits, yourself. So put it somewhere that's not going to be tempting for you. So what are 2 ideas that have worked for you? There's some more family game nights at home. Yes, I think if there was a way to buy stock in the amount of time people are spending on board games now as opposed to before, like it would be up really high. Fire pit at night outside. Yes, I'm like, man, I need to step up my game. I got fire pits going, hot tubs going. Like, man, I'm missing out on some stuff. Doing too much work, apparently. We have a hoop, so we play basketball outside. Nice. All right. So Dan or Andrew, are there any that stick out to you or anyone else?
I sort of like there's a couple around just planning meals, and somebody was also saying alternate who cooks. So you sort of have a conversation around it. So if you're having a conversation, then you'll execute, in my opinion. So I found that helpful.
Yeah, and I tend to be more impulsive, and so I'm the one who has to hide it, because if it's on the kitchen counter and I walk through, it's going in my mouth. And so even putting it in a drawer 2 feet away, it's just I don't see it, and I can cruise by without shoveling food in my face when I'm probably not actually hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to who talked about alternating cooks.
Yeah, I see Jen, I think, commented about alternating who cooks.
How does that work in your house, Jen?
I have adult children that live with me, so that helps. They're in their 20s, but we actually, and one of them's vegetarian, so we also have to get kind of creative because we still want, now that we have this opportunity, we want to eat together, but trying to do vegetarian and meat all together, it makes, we have to talk through what all do we have, what could we cook, what all would go together. And last weekend, so that we quit buying stuff we didn't need, because you know you did that whole hoarding thing at the beginning, I actually went through, okay, I'm a little OCD, but I went through and inventoried my pantry, my freezer, and my refrigerator. And so we have a list of everything available. We went through and said, okay, we haven't done anything with this buckwheat in a while. What are we going to make with the buckwheat? Well, that's the vegetarian's stuff. So she's in charge of the meal that will resolve around buckwheat. But like last night, they had something going on and weren't going to be home until 9. So I said, okay, I've got dinner. So I made like stuffed baked potatoes and salad. And then they ended up bringing home burgers to go with it. So, you know, it's just kind of doing that planning together so that you're intentional about it.
Yeah, I like that. I think the key there is intentional. And I see Stephen is suggesting letting the kids pick a movie night. Is that with dinner, Stephen, or just sort of?
No, it's after dinner, but by mine are 10 and 13. So by letting them pick it, they're excited, they're in charge, they make sure that it happens. So they make sure that I stop working and I'm watching the movie. So that's a little trick I've picked up to, you know, there's no way to say no to them.
So you've taught them early to hold you accountable. I love it.
Yes, I am not the product owner in my house. I'm merely a developer on it.
This is how bad it is for me. I'm eating all day. I just can't help myself. But my wife and daughter are both vegan. My daughter made a vegan cake, and I still ate that. It doesn't even sound good, and I still ate it. So I'm in trouble.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no, you guys have had some wonderful contributions today, and that was part of what we wanted to create was community and the ability to share back and forth, not just join and listen to some AgileThought folks talk at you for, you know, the better part of an hour. So super cool. Thanks a ton for all the engagement in the messaging as well as verbally. We've got 2 practice talks coming up. I will get those links to you via your inbox with the email you registered with. We'll still ask you to register so that we kind of have a sense for how many people will attend. We'll get those links to you tomorrow. First one's going to be on working agreements. So we talked about some of these practices we might want to do either individually or with the family. How do you get some buy-in there and with your team? So working agreements, a deep dive practice talk on the 9th. And then the notion of Kanban as a way to manage some of this too much work in process challenge. We'll deep dive on that on the 16th. So look for those invites. And we would not be doing ourselves justice if we didn't ask for some feedback. So we've got a URL, and we shortened it this time, although I failed to put it in chat, so we're going to do that right now. But bit.ly/ATcommunity1, and all lowercase. If you can hop out there, it's just a real simple place to collect some keep change type of feedback. And we won't go through the entire retrospective process with you that way, but would love feedback on things that you liked and things you might want us to consider changing. So Quincy, anything last here?
Nope. Just moving on.
All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for participating, and look forward to some feedback and hopefully see you folks again in a week from today.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Of course,
Bye.
thank you.